I spent my life chasing just a little more, not because I was greedy, not because I was unhappy with what I had, because I genuinely believed, the way you believe something you have never examined, but that simply operates as a background assumption of how things work, that enough was a threshold I would recognize when I crossed it. That at some specific point, the accumulation, the money, the achievement, the progress, the next level would produce the feeling I was running toward, the feeling of arrived, the feeling of sufficient, the feeling of enough. I am 87 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me far too long to understand. Enough is not a threshold you discover. Enough is a decision you make, and until you make it, no amount of more will ever produce it. The finish line you are chasing does not exist as a place you will eventually reach. It exists only as a place you decide to plant your flag and say, "Here. This is enough," not because nothing more is possible, not because the accumulation has stopped, or because ambition has been satisfied, or because you have reached the level that justifies stopping, but because you have decided that what you have right here, right now, in this specific life with these specific people, doing these specific things, is sufficient for the life you want to live. The world does not tell you this. The world tells you the opposite. The world tells you that enough is a threshold, that the running is the point, that the arrival will come when the number is large enough, or the achievement is complete enough, or the recognition is sufficient enough. And so you run. And the finish line recedes, and the just a little more that was always going to be the last increment turns out to require one more increment after it. And the life that was going to begin after the enough was reached turns out never to begin at all, because the enough was never reached, because it was never going to be reached, because it was never a destination. It was always only a decision. And most people die without having made it. Let me tell you about Walter. Walter was 83 years old when I had the conversation with him that I am going to tell you about. He was and had been for most of his life a person of considerable material comfort. He had worked hard and he had worked effectively, and he had accumulated across 62 years of working life the kind of wealth that most people would consider the end point of financial aspiration. And Walter, at 83, sitting in a chair that every material measure of his life said he had earned, and that every financial reality said he could fully and completely occupy, was still, in the specific interior way that no external measure can see, running, not literally, not in any way visible to the people around him, but in the way that a person who has never made the decision to stop running continues to be organized around the direction of running, even when the legs have slowed. The orientation of always toward the next increment, the specific restlessness of someone whose relationship with what they have is still, at 83, provisional. Always only the staging ground for what is next. I asked him in the gentle way that 87-year-olds can ask things that younger people cannot quite say plainly, whether he had ever decided what enough was. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said something that I carry with me as the most complete and the most honest answer to that question I have ever heard. He said, "No. I assumed I would know it when I got there. And I have never gotten there. I have never gotten there." At 83, with everything that most people spend their lives working toward, Walter had never gotten there, not because there was more to accumulate. The accumulation had long since passed any rational definition of enough, but because he had never made the decision, he had never planted the flag. He had been running toward a finish line that was never drawn, in the expectation that the running itself would eventually produce the recognition that he had crossed it. It had not. It would not. The recognition cannot come from the running. The recognition, the specific, settled, internally experienced sense of enough, comes only from the decision, only from the deliberate, conscious, specific act of deciding that what you have is sufficient for the life you want to live, and choosing to live accordingly. Walter made the decision when he was 83, not because there was nothing more he could have pursued, but because he understood finally clearly, too late for anything but the years he had left, that the decision was the only thing that could have ever produced what the running had been trying to produce. He had 4 years. I visited him in the last of them. He was the most content I had ever seen him, not because anything in his material circumstances had changed, because his relationship with his material circumstances had changed completely. He had decided, and the having decided was the thing that the accumulation had been trying to buy for 62 years and never could. 3 things. From 87 years of living and the specific hard-won understanding of what took me too long to learn. First, name the finish line before you start running. This is the single most important financial and personal decision a person can make, and it is almost never made deliberately or in advance. Most people begin the running without establishing the finish line, in the assumption that the finish line will reveal itself when they reach it. It will not reveal itself. It must be drawn. Draw it before you run, or if you are already running, stop and draw it now. Name what enough looks like for this specific life, with these specific people doing these specific things. Not in the abstract. I will know it when I see it. I will know it when I feel it. In the specific. The income that allows the experiences I value, the security that removes the specific anxiety that troubles me, the level of accomplishment that satisfies the specific aspiration I actually have, rather than the general aspiration I have inherited from the culture. Name the finish line, specifically, in terms that you can evaluate, in terms that when you cross them, you will know you have crossed them rather than moving them, because the finish line you do not name becomes the finish line that keeps moving. And a moving finish line is not a finish line, it is a direction. And running toward a direction without a destination is not ambition. It is an anxiety disguised as ambition. Name the finish line, then run toward it. And when you cross it, stop and live in what you have built. Second, comparison is the engine of never enough. This is the mechanism by which the finish line moves. The moment you have reached the threshold you believed was enough, the natural and entirely human reflex is to look sideways at what others have, and to notice, because there will always be someone who has more, that the thing you have reached is not actually the ceiling, that there is a next level, that the people at the next level seem to have something you do not, and so the finish line moves. Comparison does not produce the feeling of enough. Comparison produces the feeling of relative position, and relative position is a treadmill. You can run as fast and as long as you are able, and the relative position will not provide the arrival feeling, because someone else is always further along the same treadmill, running faster, making the distance you have covered feel insufficient by contrast. Enough is an absolute, not a relative. It cannot be found by comparison. It can only be found by the deliberate, internal, comparison-free act of deciding that what you have is sufficient for the life you actually want, independent of what anyone else has or does not have. When the comparison engine fires, when you notice someone further along the treadmill and feel the specific pull toward the next increment, that is the moment to return to the finish line you drew, not to reconsider it in light of what you have seen, to return to it, to ask, does what I see there change, What is sufficient for the life I actually want to live? In most cases, honestly answered, the answer is no. The finish line does not need to move. The comparison suggested it should. But the comparison is not your life. The comparison is someone else's life running alongside yours without sharing its destination. Third, arrival is a practice, not a destination. This is the most important thing I know about the experience of enough, and it is the thing that made the decision available to me when I finally made it. Enough does not feel the way I expected it to feel. I expected it to feel like completion, like a door that closed behind a chapter and opened into a new and different room. I expected it to feel dramatically different from the running. It does not feel dramatically different. It feels like a practice, a daily practice of choosing to experience what is already present rather than orienting toward what is not yet present. The practice of looking at the life you have built, the people in it, the work you do, the mornings and the evenings and the ordinary Tuesdays, and deciding actively and repeatedly that this is enough, that the present life, as it is sufficient. Not settling, not resignation, not the absence of aspiration or growth, or the desire to become more of what you can be. The daily, active, specific decision to treat the present as sufficient rather than provisional. To be in the life you are in rather than always in the life you are approaching. Walter, in those last 4 years, practiced arrival every day, not because he had stopped caring about things or stopped being interested in the world, but because he had stopped treating his present circumstances as a staging ground. He had planted the flag, and every day he woke up in the place he had decided was enough, and he inhabited it fully. And the inhabiting was the thing the running had been trying to produce. Arrival is a practice. Begin it today. Not when you reach the number, not when the accomplishment is complete. Today with what you have, in the life you are already living. I am 87 years old. I ran for a long time. I stopped eventually, not because I reached a destination, but because I made the decision. And the years since the decision have been the most fully inhabited years of my life. Not because the circumstances changed, because my relationship with the circumstances changed, because I decided enough is available to you right now, not when you have more, right now, as the specific, deliberate, internally generated decision that what you have is sufficient for the life you want to live. Make it today. You have been running long enough.